Welcome to Major Money Matters. My name is Major and I'm a mortgage broker, and I want to lay out some things for you to give you some understanding of how people are winning in this market. And although you may see interest rates being reported at the 6%, 5% range, there's a lot of people that are not paying those interest rates, and I want to share with you how people are doing this. Along with that, I want to share with you the long-term strategy that we're going to follow in years 2 and 3 apart from now, and help you figure out how to keep your monthly payment low in a higher interest rate environment. Okay, so this video is going to be about utilizing temporary rate buy downs in order to get your interest rate into the 3s and 4s for 2023. 2024 it's going to be a little bit higher, and then 2025 we expect interest rates to subside sometime in 2024. And then we're going to do a streamlined refinance or something like that to get your interest rate lower. So in the short term, this helps you get into a house, keep your interest rate lower, manage your monthly payment better, and then we strategize for what we do in the coming years. Okay, so first thing I want to do, I'll throw up this chart. Okay, so right now, prevailing interest rates somewhere between the high 5s, low 6s, depending on your loan type, depending on credit score and everything. But I just want to throw out an example, okay? This is not a rate quote. This is going to be just an example to help you understand some things. I'm going to talk about the 2-1 buy down and potentially the 1-0 buy down. There's also something called a 1-1 buy down. And I wanted to put this video out because many buyers don't understand this, because many realtors also, for a lot of times, do not understand this either, because nobody's taking the opportunity to explain it to them. All right, so let's throw this out. Okay, so first of all, I'm gonna go through 2 scenarios, okay? Because the majority of my families are buying in 2 different areas. One being Hawaii, where I do 50 to 60% of my business, and then Texas, where I do 40 to 50% of my business, depending on the month. So I'm gonna do 2 scenarios, and let's start off with the Hawaii scenario, okay? Now, if you live in Texas and these numbers absolutely blow your mind and you think this is crazy, that's fine, okay? Just keep in mind, it's paradise. You gotta pay to buy a house in paradise if you wanna buy a house out there. So, and if you're active duty military, you get a lot of BAH, a lot of housing allowance, a lot of COLA to help offset these prices. So let's start with this. Let's say you're buying $1 million property in Hawaii, and you're at a 5.99 interest rate, prevailing interest rates, okay? Ballpark figure, 5.99 interest rate. Now, first thing you're going to need is you're going to need the seller to agree to participate in the 2-1 buy down. Now, do they have to know it's a 2-1 buy down or a 1-0 buy down? No. Your realtor kind of just has to negotiate the concessions, what we call concessions. Concessions are simply money that the seller gives you towards your closing costs or something like that, okay? Fancy word in the real estate business, we call it concessions. But let's say you're doing a 5.99 interest rate, okay? Now, the cost of the 2-1 buy down, I'll jump ahead here. The cost of that 2-1 down, or the amount of concessions you would have to get for a 2-1 buy down, is about $22,172, okay? Assuming your interest rate is at 5.99. Now, if we change that interest rate higher or lower, then the amount of concessions is going to be higher or lower at a minimum level, okay? So I'm just giving this as an example of a qualifying interest rate. In the first year, your interest rate, instead of being 5.99, your interest rate is going to be 3.99, okay? 3.99, and instead of your principal and interest being $59.89, your principal and interest is going to be $47.68. Okay, this is principal and interest only, not counting taxes and insurance and HOAs if you have something like that. So you're going to save $1,221 in that first year every single month. Okay, so you're going to save that every single month, and then that total that you're saving over the course of those 12 months is $14,648. The seller pays that, okay? All right, not you. This money does not come from you. The seller is paying that, all right? So I'll go through why the seller would pay that later on, okay? But the seller is paying that money. You're gonna do that for 12 months. Now, it is very possible at the end of 12 months, we do a refinance if interest rates are lower and it makes sense for you, okay? We do a streamlined refinance or something like that if interest rates are, if it makes sense for us to do that. However, if we do not, in year two, your interest rate is going to be 4.99%. All right, so this is 2 points lower in the first year, 1 point lower in the second year. All right, so instead of paying $59.89, again, which would be your normal payment if you were paying 5.99%, your principal and interest payment in that second year is going to be $53.62. Okay, $53.62, that's a savings of $627 over the course of 12 months. That's a total of $7,524 that you're going to save. That's year two savings and year one savings and year two savings. So if you add up those two things, okay, if you add up those 2 years, the total of those savings, that is $22,172. That is what the seller is paying for the 2-1 buy down. That's concessions that you're getting from the seller. Now, why would a seller give this up? Okay, number one, if the house is laying on the market for a while, if the seller is motivated to sell, if let's say the seller bought this house at $600,000 and they're now selling at $1 million, do they really care about $22,000 if they get their money quickly and they can go into escrow quickly? There is the potential for that, okay? Do they understand what's going on in the market and the fact that homes are hanging on the market longer because of higher interest rates? Do they understand that? Has their listing agent, explained that to them that this is a good deal because you're going to continue to stay on the market because of higher interest rate? Did the listing agent do a good job communicating that to them and helping them understand just the nature of the market? Sure. These are all factors that depend on whether the seller is going to be willing to do this for you. All right. So it's a holistic view of the transaction from the buyer side and the seller side and figuring out how to negotiate. Now, what if the house is listed at $1 million and the seller says, well, I don't want to give up $22,000. You might offer $1,010,000 and then ask for $22,000. So the seller isn't eating all of it. You're giving a higher purchase price. Of course, the house has to appraise. You're doing a higher purchase price, but then, the seller is not eating all of it. And in the end, 2023, you're going to pay an interest rate at 3.99, okay, or potentially lower. Now, one other thing about this is this buyer, can pay your money to buy down the rate, and then the 2-1 buy down kicks in from there. So let's say you had money available and you wanted to buy points, okay? Go look at one of my other videos. I talk about buying points and stuff like that. But let's say you wanted to buy points. If you wanted to pay points up front, you could buy down your interest rate to 3.5 potentially, and then the 2-1 buy down would kick in from that point, and then your interest rate would be, you would buy down your interest rate to 5.5, and then your interest rate would be at 3.5 versus 5.5. So there are many different ways to do this. I just want to give you some general examples. By the way, there's also the 1-0 buy down, which means your interest rate is 1 point lower in that first year, and then you go back to whatever interest rate you lock at. So if you were locking at 5.99, then you would potentially have an interest rate at 4.99 in that first year. Okay, let's look at that scenario. If you were at 4.99, instead of your principal and interest being $59.89, your principal and interest is $53.62. You save $627 over 12 months. That costs the seller $7,524. So what if the seller says, hey, I'm not giving you $22,000, I'll give you $10,000, okay? You can use $10,000 of that money to do a 1-0 buy down for $7,500 and then use the other $2,500 towards your closing costs, okay? Many different strategies, many different ways here to skin a cat, okay? So let's pause there. That's Hawaii scenarios, okay? Let's do something a little more conservative. And let's go to maybe a Texas scenario where we're doing $350,000 purchase or something like that, okay? We're doing a $350,000 purchase. By the way, you can do this on a jumbo loan, but I'm most often seeing this done on VA loans, FHA loans, and conventional loans. And I'm not going to get into this very much, but there's a certain percentage of concessions or a max concessions that the seller can actually give on all of those, loans and all of those scenarios. So just keep that in mind. Okay. So we have to look at your specific situation and make sure this makes sense. So let's say we're doing a Texas purchase at $350,000. Interest rate, let's keep it consistent at 5.99. Okay. Instead of paying 5.99 for that first year, you're going to pay 3.99 in that first year. Let's talk about doing a 2-1 buy down. You're doing 3.99. Okay. That instead of paying $2,096 for that first year, you're going to pay $1,669. All right. On that principal and interest. That's going to save you $427. At $427 over the course of 1 year, that's a total of $5,127. All right, that you're going to save. But the lender's still going to get that money because the seller is going to pay that $5,127. 2 points lower for you in year one. You have a 3.99% interest rate for all of 2023. All right. Now, year two, you're going to go to 4.99. Now, this is not an adjustable rate mortgage. Some people say, hey, this is just an ARM. No. On an ARM, your interest rate adjusts up and down. This is a temporary rate buy down. We know exactly where the market is going. We don't know where the market is going, but we know exactly how your interest rate and your monthly payment is going to adjust. And we know exactly what those numbers are going to be and when you have to pay that money. All right. So 4.99 in year two. Okay, it's a 2-1 buy down. Instead of paying $2,096, you're going to pay $1,877. You're paying a 4.99% interest rate. Your monthly, that's a savings of $219 over 12 months, which is a annual subsidy savings for you of $2,600. Now, the amount of money you would need for this from the seller is $7,760. Again, whatever price that you place on the house, you have to the house has to appraise for that, or you have to cover the difference in cash. Sometimes it makes sense to cover the difference in cash if it's like $1,000 or something, if the seller is going to give you, $7,000 towards paying down that interest rate. All right. So this is how much it costs the seller. You're going to have to get $7,760 in concessions from the seller. Sometimes the seller will do that at $350. Sometimes you have to do $354 for them to give up $3 on their end and you split the difference. Sometimes you have to go to $357. And sometimes that makes sense in order to pay $357 and get $7,000 from them to do a temporary rate buy down to make it feasible and reasonable for your budget. So that's a 2-1 buy down in that situation. Keep in mind, there's also a 1-0 buy down. There's also a 1-1 buy down. All right. 1-1 buy down means your interest rate is 1 point lower in the first year and 1 point lower in the second year. All right. And this is how you can get an interest rate in the 3s and 4s when everything you're seeing reported on the news says interest rates are in the 5s, 6s, stuff like that. Now, what's the strategy moving forward? Okay. So what would be your strategy going forward? Your strategy going forward would be, we are looking for an opportunity to refinance you at the end of year 1 or in the middle of year 2, okay? It is estimated by most economists that interest rates are going to be lower in a year and a half, 2 years from now, okay? So what we're looking for is for the market to drop, for interest rates to go lower, and then we do a streamlined refinance on that situation. Some people ask me like, hey, how much does a refinance actually cost? A refinance actually costs you the amount of your title and escrow fees, so that the cost to you is potentially $2,000 to $4,000, depending on what state you're in and that title company's fees and stuff like that. When you do a refinance, we don't charge any lender fees on those refinances when you finance with us, so that's not a concern. You're just paying the title and escrow fees and stuff like that, because you have to pay them when you do a refinance with the title company. So that money is not paid out of pocket necessarily. It's kind of rolled into your loan, okay? So it's not paid out of pocket. Now, when it's time to refinance, we go through all of these scenarios with you and figure out how to structure your loan, because you never have One thing people don't understand about lending is you never have exactly one interest rate, okay? When you're locking in your rate, you have an option of interest rates if you want to pay points to take a credit or something like that. You never have one exact interest rate. You kind of choose your own adventure. And it's the same one on refinance too. So, but that's down the road a year, two in advance. But most of my buyers that are locking today using a 2-1 buy down or something like that, they are not actually going to pay or ever get to the point where they're paying the rate that they locked at, because we're going to refinance them in a year or two. The likelihood of them actually seeing that rate is actually pretty low. So, long video, long explanation, but it was required for you to understand, okay, what's going on here. Now, if you're a buyer's agent or you're a seller's agent, okay, it's important for you to understand this, because when you're having your listing presentation with your seller, you need to be able to go over this and help them understand how we're going to get into escrow quickly, all right? How we're going to offer what the buyer needs in order for them to commit to buying this home. I would recommend that you think twice before you drop the price on a home, all right? Think twice before you drop the price on a home. Because if you drop the price by $20,000 on your listing, you drop the price by $20,000 on your listing, you just saved the buyer $100 per month. A difference of $20,000 saves the buyer about $100 per month. But if you gave up $10,000 in concessions rather than dropping your price $20,000, you save your seller $10,000, because really they're giving up that money and they're moving on to the next transaction. They're getting $10,000 more rather than dropping the price $20,000. So don't drop your price, offer more in concessions in order to convince a buyer to buy this home and make it beneficial for that buyer. If you're a buyer's agent, figure out whether this is an option. You know, there might be, if there isn't very much wiggle room, let's say somebody bought a year ago and for whatever reason they have to sell, might not be a lot of wiggle room in between the concessions or something like that. So you may have to look for house to house to house to say, hey, is there an opportunity for a buy down or a rate buy down or concessions or something like that? Be strategic in helping out your buyer in order to get them the best possible deal and give them the best possible opportunity to subside these higher interest rates, higher than they were before, okay? All right, again, long video, but I want you to be empowered with the information you need. This is how your buyer can have an interest rate in the 3s and 4s in 2023. See you next time on Major Money Matters.